What happens when America's beloved talk show host meets the world's most scrutinized duchess on live television? What happens when two masters of public image sit down together, both thinking they know exactly how this conversation will go? Well, you're about to find out. Because what started as the most anticipated feel-good interview of the year was about to become something nobody saw coming. If you think you know how celebrity interviews work, think again. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, because this story is going to take you on a ride you'll never forget. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Ellen DeGeneres Show studio was buzzing with an energy that could practically be felt through the television screens of millions of viewers tuning in that sunny Los Angeles afternoon. The familiar blue and white set gleamed under the studio lights, every surface polished to perfection for what was being billed as the interview event of the season. Ellen's signature backdrop, with its cheerful colors and welcoming design, had never looked more inviting. The audience was electric. 300 carefully selected fans packed the studio, their excitement palpable as they chatted among themselves, phones discreetly tucked away but fingers itching to capture what they knew would be television gold. These weren't just any audience members. These were Ellen devotees, people who had waited months for tickets, who knew every dance move, every catchphrase, every running joke that made the show America's favorite daytime destination. When the show's opening music began to play, that familiar upbeat melody that had welcomed millions of viewers into Ellen's world for nearly 2 decades, the crowd erupted. But this wasn't their usual enthusiasm. This was something special. Because today, they weren't just getting Ellen, they were getting royalty. Ellen DeGeneres burst onto the stage with her trademark energy, that infectious smile lighting up her face as she waved to the crowd. She was in her element, wearing a perfectly tailored blazer that somehow managed to look both casual and elegant, her short blonde hair styled to perfection. This was Ellen at her absolute best, confident, charismatic, and ready to work the crowd like the seasoned entertainer she'd been for decades. "Good afternoon, everybody," Ellen called out, her voice carrying easily over the cheers. The audience responded with the kind of roar usually reserved for rock concerts, their enthusiasm feeding Ellen's already considerable energy. She danced her way to center stage, throwing in a few signature moves that had the crowd on their feet. "We have got an incredible show for you today," Ellen continued, her eyes sparkling with the promise of something extraordinary. "Someone very special is joining us. Someone who I think you're all very excited to meet." The crowd's cheers grew even louder, if that was possible. Ellen raised her hands to quiet them, but her grin betrayed how much she was loving every second. She's an actress, an activist, a humanitarian, and oh yeah, she happens to be a duchess too. Please give the warmest Ellen DeGeneres Show welcome to Meghan Markle. The studio exploded. The carefully composed audience members leaped to their feet, applauding with an intensity that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. Camera operators swiveled to capture every angle of the enthusiasm, knowing that this moment would be replayed countless times across social media within hours. And then she appeared. Meghan Markle walked onto the Ellen stage like she owned it, radiating the kind of confidence that only comes from years of navigating the highest levels of public scrutiny. She was stunning. There was simply no other word for it. Dressed in an elegant cream-colored ensemble that perfectly balanced royal sophistication with California casual, she looked every inch the Duchess while somehow appearing completely at home in the bright, playful world of daytime television. Her smile was radiant, practiced, and absolutely perfect. This was Meghan in full media-trained glory, every gesture calculated, every expression designed to project warmth, authenticity, and just the right amount of relatability. She waved to the crowd with genuine-seeming enthusiasm, her posture straight but not rigid, her movements fluid and natural. Ellen met her center stage, and the two women embraced with what appeared to be genuine warmth. The cameras caught every moment. The way Ellen's face lit up with what seemed like real affection, the way Meghan laughed at something Ellen whispered in her ear. The comfortable familiarity between two women who had clearly connected beyond the typical host-guest dynamic. "Look at you," Ellen exclaimed as they made their way to the interview area, the iconic chairs where so many memorable conversations had taken place. "You look absolutely gorgeous. Doesn't she look gorgeous, everybody?" The audience responded with another wave of enthusiastic approval. Meghan settled into her chair with practiced grace, crossing her legs elegantly and flashing that million-dollar smile that had charmed the world. "Thank you so much for having me, Ellen. It's so good to be here, especially back home in LA. There's something about this California sunshine that just makes everything feel possible, doesn't it?" Ellen nodded enthusiastically. "There really is. And speaking of making things possible, can we just talk for a minute about everything you've been doing? I mean, your work with women's empowerment, your advocacy for paid family leave, your humanitarian efforts. You've been busy." The audience applauded again, and Meghan's smile somehow grew even brighter. "Well, when you're given a platform, you have to use it responsibly, right? I feel incredibly fortunate to be able to shine a light on issues that matter, to amplify voices that might not otherwise be heard." "And that style," Ellen continued, gesturing to Meghan's outfit. "I have to say, you've brought a whole new level of elegance to everything you do. The way you've redefined what it means to be in the public eye, it's inspiring." The conversation flowed easily, both women clearly comfortable in their roles. Ellen was the perfect host, engaged, complimentary, creating space for Meghan to shine. Meghan was the perfect guest, articulate, warm, striking just the right balance between relatability and distinction. But as the laughter began to die down and Ellen reached for her note cards, something subtle shifted in her expression. The smile remained, but there was a glint in her eyes that suggested the real conversation was just beginning. "So," Ellen said, leaning forward slightly with that trademark look that regular viewers knew meant things were about to get interesting, "let's talk about some of the more personal stuff, shall we?" "I have to ask," Ellen continued with a mischievous grin, "do you still curtsy to Harry at home? Because I'm imagining you making breakfast and just dropping into a little curtsy before handing him his coffee." The audience burst into laughter, and Meghan joined in, but something flickered across her face, a momentary tightness around her eyes. "Oh no, definitely no curtsying at breakfast," she replied, her media training kicking in smoothly, "though I do make a mean cup of tea." Ellen wasn't letting it go. "But seriously, all those royal protocols, bowing, walking 3 steps behind, not touching anyone, that must have been quite the adjustment for a California girl." Her tone was still light, playful, but there was an edge creeping in that made Meghan's smile grow slightly more forced. Ellen shuffled her cards with theatrical flair, then looked up with seemingly innocent curiosity. "Speaking of family adjustments, how are things with your dad these days? Do you still talk to Thomas?" The studio went dead quiet for a heartbeat. The audience, sensing they'd stumbled into something deeper, offered uncertain chuckles. Meghan's composure wavered visibly, her shoulders tensed, and she took a measured breath before responding. That's a very personal question, Ellen," Meghan said carefully, her media training struggling against genuine emotion. "Family relationships are complicated, and I've always tried to keep private matters private." But Ellen, emboldened by the audience's curious energy, pressed forward. "But he's been pretty public about missing you, hasn't he?" "You know what?" Ellen said, clapping her hands together with sudden enthusiasm. "Before we get too serious, I think our audience would love to take a little trip down memory lane. We've put together some of your greatest hits from your acting days." The large screens around the studio lit up, and suddenly Meghan's face from years past filled every monitor. There she was on Deal or No Deal, holding briefcase number 24 in a sparkly dress, her smile bright and hopeful. The audience immediately burst into delighted laughter and applause. "Look at that!" Ellen exclaimed, pointing at the screen. "Briefcase girl! I mean, who knew we had royalty right there on game show television?" But the clips kept coming. Meghan in bit parts, commercial appearances, even a brief shot from her Suits days that had been edited to look almost comedic out of context. Each clip drew bigger laughs from the audience, their enthusiasm infectious and unrelenting. Meghan's face had gone rigid. She was still smiling, that professional, camera-ready smile. But her eyes betrayed something else entirely. Embarrassment, humiliation, the kind of deep discomfort that comes from watching your entire pre-royal life reduced to entertainment fodder. "Oh, and this one!" Ellen pointed to another clip, her voice rising with mock excitement. "I love how you're just so earnest in everything. It's like you knew you were destined for bigger things." The audience roared with laughter, completely caught up in what they saw as harmless nostalgia. But from Meghan's perspective, sitting in that chair, it felt like something entirely different. It felt like her entire journey was being mocked, her early career reduced to a punchline for daytime television. Those were good times. Meghan managed, her voice slightly strained despite her best efforts to maintain composure. The smile never left her face, but anyone paying close attention could see it was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Ellen sensed the shift but misread it completely. Instead of pulling back, she leaned in. "Come on, you have to admit some of those early roles were pretty hilarious." The laughter continued, but something in the studio's energy was beginning to change. Meghan's discomfort was becoming harder to hide, and for the first time since the interview began, she looked like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Actually, Ellen," Meghan interrupted, her voice cutting through the laughter with unexpected sharpness. The studio fell silent so quickly it was almost jarring. Those weren't just hilarious early roles. They were my career. They were how I supported myself, how I built my independence, how I earned every opportunity that came after. Ellen blinked, clearly taken aback by the sudden shift in tone. The easy rhythm of the interview had just been shattered, and she wasn't quite sure how to recover. "Oh, I didn't mean—" "I worked incredibly hard for every single one of those jobs," Meghan continued, her composure slipping for the first time. Her voice carried a tremor of genuine emotion that hadn't been there moments before. "And yes, some of them might look silly now, but they represent years of auditions, rejections, and small victories that meant everything to me at the time." The audience sat in stunned silence, suddenly aware they might have been laughing at something that wasn't actually funny. The woman in front of them was no longer the poised duchess, graciously enduring gentle teasing. She was someone whose feelings had genuinely been hurt. Ellen, sensing the mood shift but not quite knowing how to navigate it, attempted to lighten things with a nervous laugh. "Well, of course, I just meant they were charming. Right, everybody?" But this time, the audience didn't respond. And more tellingly, Meghan didn't laugh either. Instead, she sat perfectly still, her jaw set, her eyes focused somewhere just past Ellen's shoulder. The balance of power in the studio had shifted completely, and everyone could feel it. "You know what, Ellen?" Meghan said, her voice steady but carrying an edge that made everyone in the studio lean forward slightly. "This isn't funny anymore." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Ellen's smile flickered, but instead of backing down, something stubborn flashed in her eyes. Maybe it was years of controlling every conversation on her show. Maybe it was the pressure of live television. Or maybe she simply couldn't read the room. Whatever it was, she doubled down. "Oh, come on, Meghan," Ellen said with a forced lightness that fooled no one. "You put yourself out there. You wrote a book. You did interviews. You made yourself a public figure. You can't expect people to just forget all the interesting parts of your story, can you?" The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the fun, light-hearted Ellen show they'd come to see. This felt different. Rawer, more dangerous. "Interesting parts?" Meghan's voice rose slightly, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Or convenient punchlines for your show?" Ellen leaned forward, her media instincts warring with her human ones. "I'm just saying, when you choose to live your life in the spotlight, when you marry into the most famous family in the world, people are going to be curious about your journey. That's just reality." "Reality?" Meghan repeated, and there was something in her tone that made the entire studio hold its breath. "You know what, Ellen?" Meghan said, her voice steady but carrying an edge that made everyone in the studio lean forward slightly. "This isn't funny anymore." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Ellen's smile flickered, but instead of backing down, something stubborn flashed in her eyes. Maybe it was years of controlling every conversation on her show. Maybe it was the pressure of live television. Or maybe she simply couldn't read the room. Whatever it was, she doubled down. "Oh, come on, Meghan," Ellen said with a forced lightness that fooled no one. "You put yourself out there. You wrote a book. You did interviews. You made yourself a public figure. You can't expect people to just forget all the interesting parts of your story, can you?" Quote, the audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the fun, light-hearted Ellen show they'd come to see. This felt different. Raw, more dangerous. Interesting parts? Meghan's voice rose slightly, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Or convenient punchlines for your show? Ellen leaned forward, her media instincts warring with her human ones. I'm just saying, when you choose to live your life in the spotlight, when you marry into the most famous family in the world, people are going to be curious about your journey. That's just reality. Reality, Meghan repeated, and there was something in her tone that made the entire studio hold its breath. Yes, reality, Ellen said, finding her confidence again. The reality is that you've made a career out of telling your story. The Oprah interview, Netflix, book deals. You've monetized every detail of your royal experience, so forgive me if a few throwback clips seem fair game. The audience gasped. This wasn't the Ellen they knew. Meghan's face went white, then flushed. Monetized? Her voice was barely a whisper but carried to every corner. You think sharing my truth about racism, about feeling suicidal, was about money? I think you've been very strategic about when and how you share these revelations, Ellen replied with cruel confidence. Studio crew frantically signaled behind cameras. Producers whispered about cutting to commercial. Strategic, Meghan said slowly. You know what was strategic? Staying silent for 2 years while tabloids destroyed me. Protecting an institution that never protected me. Her voice cracked, tears threatening. Staying silent was killing me, Ellen, and if speaking my truth makes me strategic, I'll wear that label proudly. The confrontation had crossed every line of daytime television decency, and that's when Meghan finally shattered. The tears she'd been fighting for the last 10 minutes spilled over, streaking down her cheeks in a way that no amount of professional makeup could conceal. Her hands trembled as she reached for tissues that weren't there, her breathing becoming shallow and ragged. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking completely. You don't know what it's like to live under this kind of scrutiny every single day. To have every word twisted, every gesture analyzed, every moment of pain turned into entertainment for people who think they know you. The studio had gone completely silent. Not the comfortable quiet of an engaged audience, but the heavy, suffocating silence of 300 people witnessing something they weren't supposed to see. Ellen's demeanor shifted instantly. The combative host vanished, replaced by someone who suddenly realized she'd pushed too far. Meghan, No, Meghan interrupted, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand in a gesture so human, so raw, that it seemed to strip away every trace of royal polish. You wanted reality. This is reality. This is what it looks like when someone breaks. Behind the cameras, producers were frantically signaling to cut to commercial. But Ellen, perhaps paralyzed by what she'd unleashed, kept the cameras rolling. The audience that had roared with laughter just minutes earlier now sat in suffocating silence. 300 people who came for entertainment found themselves unwilling witnesses to genuine human suffering. Their role had shifted completely. They were no longer consumers of celebrity content, but participants in something that felt deeply wrong. A woman in the third row wiped her own tears. An elderly man near the back shook his head in disapproval. The energy that had been so electric and fun had curdled into something toxic, uncomfortable. Camera operators, unsure whether to zoom in on Meghan's tear-streaked face or pull back respectfully, settled for tight shots that captured every tremor, every broken breath. The studio crew exchanged horrified glances, knowing they were documenting something that would haunt daytime television forever. Ellen tried one last time. Maybe we should. But the damage was done, and everyone in that room knew it. What happened next would change everything about how celebrity breakdowns are consumed in the digital age. Despite strict no-phone policies, several audience members had managed to keep their devices hidden. The moment Meghan's tears began to fall, fingers moved instinctively toward record buttons. Within 30 seconds of her breakdown, shaky vertical videos were being uploaded to TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram from inside the studio. "Oh my God, Meghan is crying on LNRN," typed at Studio Audience 47, attaching a blurry 10-second clip that would be viewed 2-3 million times in the next hour. The social media explosion was immediate and merciless. #Meghan crying began trending worldwide before the show had even cut to its first commercial break. #and too far followed minutes later. Then #Royal Breakdown. The hashtags multiplied faster than anyone could track them. Twitter became a battlefield of hot takes and moral judgments. Ellen crossed the line. This is cruel. 47K likes. Meghan knew what she signed up for when she married into royalty. 52K likes. This is what happens when you can't control the narrative anymore. 38K likes. TikTok users were already creating reaction videos, their faces split-screened with Meghan's tears. Guys, I am shook by what just happened on Ellen. Became the opening line for hundreds of videos that would collectively garner millions of views. Instagram stories exploded with screenshot after screenshot, each accompanied by fire emojis, crying face emojis, and think piece captions about celebrity culture, mental health, and the ethics of live television. The breakdown that had lasted perhaps 3 minutes in the studio was now being dissected frame by frame across every platform imaginable. Memes were already being created. GIFs were being clipped. Reaction compilations were being edited and uploaded. News outlets, initially caught off guard by the speed of the social media storm, scrambled to publish their own takes. Entertainment Tonight, TMZ, People magazine, all rushing to be first with their analysis of what was already being called the Ellen interview that broke the internet. But perhaps most disturbing of all was how quickly Meghan's genuine pain was being transformed into content. Her tears, her broken voice, her raw humanity. All of it was becoming fodder for engagement metrics, click-through rates, and advertising revenue. Within 2 hours of the interview ending, you couldn't scroll through any social platform without encountering Meghan's breakdown. Her most vulnerable moment had become the most public spectacle of the year. The machine of modern media consumption had taken her pain and turned it into profit for everyone except her. And the worst part? The interview hadn't even finished airing yet. In the days that followed, the interview dominated every headline, every talk show panel, every social media feed. Meghan disappeared from public view entirely, her representatives issuing only a brief statement. The Duchess values her privacy during this time and asks for space to process recent events with her family. Ellen, meanwhile, faced the fiercest backlash of her career. Media critics called it journalism's lowest moment, while former guests came forward questioning her interview tactics. Her show's ratings plummeted as sponsors quietly distanced themselves. The cultural reckoning was swift and merciless. Think pieces dissected the ethics of entertainment, the cost of celebrity culture, and society's appetite for public pain. When did we become this cruel? Asked a viral New York Times op-ed. Most haunting was the question that lingered. In an age where every moment is content and every emotion is consumable, can any public figure truly control their narrative? Meghan had sought to reclaim her story, but instead had become the perfect symbol of how modern fame devours its victims. The spotlight that had once elevated her had finally, completely, consumed her. The interview that began with laughter ended with a lesson no one wanted to learn. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Quote,